So I'm here today with Alan Carmen, who advised me to introduce him as the old retired guy. And Alan, welcome to the Rock Island Line.
Thanks for having me, Annika. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to, several people reached out and said, you know who you should talk to? Alan Carmen. So we haven't known each other, so this will be really fun because you've been working and living in the city of Rock Island for a long time, and you know everything, I think.
I wouldn't go quite that far, but I've been around for a while. Actually, probably as long as you've been on Earth.
Okay.
Almost. Because I know you just had a birthday not too long ago, so belated happy birthday.
Thank you so much. Yep, I'm 45, so.
Yeah, that's how long I've been in Rock Island. And December 15th of this year, it'll be 45 years.
That's a good place to start. What brought you to Rock Island? Where does your story with Rock Island begin?
A job brought me here as an urban planner. I had been working in northwestern Pennsylvania in a small town, Titusville, Pennsylvania, and decided it was time to move on. I kind of reached the end of where I wanted to be there, and was looking for some bigger professional challenges. Was looking around, and the job was advertised as an urban planner here, and interviewed and fortunate enough to have been awarded the position. Started December 15th, and I figured I'd be here for 3 to 5 years. And 45 years later, I'm still here.
Very cool. Did you go to school to be an urban planner? Was that what you got your degree in?
Yeah, I had 2 degrees. Bachelor's degree from Penn State in a program that no longer exists. The major was community development, and which was phased out, in the 1990s, I think it was. I was there back in the 70s and graduated from there after 4 years, and then took a summer off and went to Europe for 10 weeks with a friend and did backpacking around Europe, which was kind of a life-changing experience. It's been between undergraduate school at Penn State and then went to University of Wisconsin-Madison for a 2 years graduate program and got my master's in urban regional planning, and then looked around for a job and found that job in Titusville, Pennsylvania, stayed there, and then again came here 3 years later.
So I want to talk all about the urban planning piece, but what was life-changing about the backpacking in Europe?
It was a chance to get away from the U.S. back in this had been 1975, summer of 75, and it was post-Vietnam era. It was in between undergraduate degree, which was fun, and knowing the challenge of what was coming with graduate school, and it was a chance to escape for a while and saved money up, worked some jobs, had the money available, and a friend and I just decided we're going. So part of the opportunity was my aunt and her husband were living in London at the time. So I knew that we were going to fly to Paris, take the train and night ferry across and get to London, spend a week with them, and then drive around Wales and Scotland and England. And then he'll head back over the continent, take the student rail pass opportunity and travel through Belgium, Denmark, where else were we? Germany, Austria, Northern Italy, France, and we took a vacation from our vacation at one point, and spent 4 days on a beach in Spain on the Mediterranean coast, and then went back up to Paris. But life-changing was just the uncertainty. We knew kind of where we wanted to be when. I had put an itinerary together, but it was just the cultural exposure, getting in touch with people who you never would have been in contact with previously. So the languages, the cultures, the foods, the scenery, the history, the depth of history there, all those things had a huge impact on me. Appreciation for architecture and history and the connection that it has to the physical element of how we see things around us, how we relate to them. And it just had a profound impact on my thinking about how we function as a society and as a civilization.
Must have been so interesting to do this tour of other countries and probably be immersed in different cities and, like you said, the history, the buildings, and then to come back and start a master's program in urban planning.
Yeah.
And to have not only the view from the United States, but this kind of cross-cultural international lens of how do other places do development? What does that mean?
It was eye-opening. You grow up here in the U.S., you have a certain perspective, you think about things in certain ways, and then you get exposed to other viewpoints that you may not have ever been exposed to previously. So it made had some impacts on how I thought about what we were about as a society and what we were trying to achieve as a society and as humans.
What is when you think about urban planning, I mean, obviously you can't teach me everything you learned in 2 years and 5 minutes, but what is that? So when you think about what you got your master's degree in, what does that degree kind of equip you with to go into a community and make change or develop? Or
the program in Madison, where I went for 2 years, was they had multiple paths and opportunities. Some were transportation, some were environmental, some were central city or policy planning oriented, some were planning theory. For some of the students, it was a chance to jump from master's degree knowing that they were going to move forward and get their PhDs and teach. So for me personally, it was a case of being exposed to strategic planning, strategic thinking about the environment that we live in, how we can shape it both physically, from a system standpoint, from a human standpoint. And it was more a case of also working with cities as opposed to larger regional areas or bigger areas still from a national planning standpoint or health planning administration. So it was a case of looking at trying to figure out how we as people living in cities relate to that city and how the city relates to us. And so it was a case of can we make changes that are for the positive? Can we make changes that will positively affect people's lives in the long term? And so that's kind of the background I came from and what I was able to learn in those 2 years. And then one of the people that I worked with closely was my advisor, who was a New York Jewish guy, Jerry Kaufman, professor, well-known nationally as a planner. He had been actually a real planner and then went into academia. And he really influenced my viewpoint of how we should think about and relate to government and how it affects people and vice versa.
And maybe as we talk about the things you did in Rock Island, that perspective will be illuminated. But can you give us a sneak peek? Like when you say that, how can a city planner or an urban planner impact people and?
Well, I mean, the key thing is getting to know people. I mean, there's a lot of separation typically between government and people, and constituents, citizens, residents, and we need to build bridges and learn what people's issues are by getting to know them, understand them, relate to them as humans, not just as somebody that's out there that you're having at your job has an effect on, and so. That humanistic perspective is one that I think I carried through my career, which some planners don't. They think of it more in terms of I'm a bureaucrat and I'm going to get this job done because this is what the rules say, this is how I'm going to do it, and I guess this really is having an impact on some people, isn't it? I hadn't really thought about that. So I always keep that in the back of my mind as what the effect is going to be on real people.
I really appreciate that perspective. Yeah, anything you're planning or doing, that there are lives and people and on the back end of that. Yeah. So you arrive in Rock Island to take this job as an urban planner 45 years ago. Mm-hmm. And what is your impression of the city? And can you paint a picture of Rock Island for us in what year would that have been?
It would have been December of 1980.
1980.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'll go back a little bit because the town I worked in previously, Titusville, was a town of 6,300 people. Small town, but it was the birthplace of the oil industry. The first commercially drilled oil well was in Titusville, Pennsylvania in 1854, I think it was, in August of 1854. As a result, it had money, obviously. So there were some beautiful old homes there. There was old money there, but it had progressed to the point where the oil industry obviously moved on, and Titusville was left behind. But it had that perspective of history, the architecture relating to money that people had because of that industry, and since it had changed, it had lost a lot of that glamour. And obviously it was a small town in a small place in northwestern Pennsylvania, like 50 miles south of Erie, Pennsylvania. And that was kind of a culture shock to me because I had grown up in Philadelphia. And my high school had almost as many people in it as the city of Titusville. So that was a culture shock for me. And then coming from that perspective to Rock Island, in a town of about 50,000, I think there was about, when I came to town, was it 45,000 perhaps?
So we were just past our boom of population?
It would have been probably, I think 1960 was the 50,000 peak.
Okay.
And it had been declining since and continues to do so. So it was going from Philadelphia, of a metropolitan area with a few million people, to the 6 years of school in different college towns, or in Madison being both a state capital and a university town. That's schizophrenia that applies there. Mm-hmm. And then going to Titusville, 6,300, 6,800, and then here to Rock Island from Titusville. It was good to be back in an urban area. So we had 40-some thousand people here, but it was the 400,000 people in the Quad City area that was provided the more of an urban setting. It wasn't one central city that we have here, but it was the multiple cities, obviously. But Rock Island was a very comfortable place to be. Obviously much bigger than Titusville, not as big as Philly, but it was the right size for me at that point. And I figured it would be a chance to have an impact, make a difference, perhaps learn a few things, and then move on. I think looking back, the nature of Rock Island at the time was one that was in somewhat of a separation between the city as a government and the city, the politicians, the elected officials, and its citizens. There seemed to be a split. And that was a concern when I came here, seeing that those conflicts existed at multiple levels and multiple subject areas, everything from race relations to housing quality to fix the streets. And so, those things don't change necessarily, but it was pretty obvious that there were some major issues and conflict between government and citizens.
So you step in, you're new on the job, and you're noticing that the people are disconnected from the politicians who represent them, are disconnected from the folks working in the city, that the communication, there seemed to be a lack of communication or flow between the parts of a city that shape it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it saw that the position I was in at the time was an urban planner, which was not management, not upper level. So I was able to influence public policy to a very limited degree. I could write reports about a zoning change or a plan for an area for the southwest area of Rock Island, and work on that to some degree, and then forward that on to the city council. And obviously, city council makes the policy decisions. So I had a much more limited degree of impact early on when I first came here. But one of the things that came to pass was my interest from the perspective of the European trip, the Titusville architecture and its old style, and recognizing what Rock Island had and its architectural history and cultural history. And that became an opportunity to kind of build a bridge. And so I saw that as an opportunity for me, and there were other residents in the town, in Rock Island at the time, that said that they were trying to promote the old architecture, the history, refurbish the old homes. And so that built a connection with me and the neighborhood. That community was trying to rebuild that architecture and that history. So it created an opportunity, a path for the city to then move forward, to latch on to the architecture, latch on to the history, and begin to view that as a strength and something that could be marketed, something that would be a beneficial impact on residents, beneficial impact on the neighborhood. And so that kind of created an avenue that I think the city continues to try to move forward on. And it's gone through cycles over time, obviously, in terms of level of activity.
I think that's interesting because Atticus Garrison was on and we talked about ChatGPT. And so myself, a neighbor of mine, and Atticus all put in a question to ChatGPT about how do you do economic development in Rock Island, given that we're in this Quad City region and we're nestled among these other cities, that it's both an asset that they're next to us, but it's also, we're also in competition in some ways. Just looking at our unique demographics. And I think all of our responses from ChatGPT are picking up on something you noticed when you came here 45 years ago, that leaning into our identity as old, leaning into this being a place that carries history, and leaning into preservation, to the richness, the stories, is part of economic development. And we can't really be our sister cities. We don't have places to sprawl to just do new development all the time, or new buildings, so you kind of hit on that before the internet was even invented. You were like, you need to lean into your history and your preserve what is here and kind of dig into the oldness instead of chasing new and shiny.
Yeah,
or maybe it's a combination.
It is, and I think it is really a combination. Thinking back on my past of growing up in Philly, and at one point had an internship work when I was at Penn State. They had internships for a term, and I worked in the old 10 weeks in the old city section of Philadelphia, which was Independence Mall area. So it's Independence Hall, Constitution Hall, or Carpenter's Hall, Elfreth's Alley, which is an old 18th century streetscape that is still actively lived in by people, that has cobblestone streets, that's preserved as it is. So that exposed me to the depth of history and architecture in the U.S. Going to a European trip, went back, then hundreds of years, centuries, compared to what the U.S.'s relatively short history is. And then coming to Rock Island, ultimately, it was a case of we have that, 19th century opportunity of where people invested, grew up here. The Mississippi River is a key element to that, obviously, and we have a relatively short history compared to European and other places in the world, European history and other places, but we've got a niche, we've got a story to tell, and how do we go about trying to identify what that story is, and then tell it. And so people understand it. Nowadays, it's marketing, or it's branding, or rebranding. And so what do we latch onto that says that we are unique, and that tells our story that is different from other places, and appreciate that. And then the schizophrenia that's out there is we've got the old, but we also have the opportunity for new. And I think that's one of the strengths of Rock Island, is that we do have kind of the two elements to the city, where we've got the old established peninsula area that where we're landlocked by the two rivers and Moline on our east, and then we jump across the southwest across the Rock River, and we've got a growth opportunity. So we have kind of the best of both worlds opportunities to recognize what we've got, build on that, renovate it, rehabilitate it, build on the history of that, but at the same time have an opportunity for new development elsewhere. Or obviously there's redevelopment in older sections of town when that needs to happen, when things wear out.
When you reflect back on Rock Island's history, can you think of a time where there was just synergy and the old development and the new development and people were communicating? And is there, like, in your lifetime of, because you worked for the city of Rock Island for
32 years rather, yeah.
32 years. Yeah. So in that 32 years, do you remember like a real high point? I mean, can you put a year on it, or?
That's a good question. I think one of the keys, I think that gets back to my comment about building the bridges and building on the history, and kind of that renaissance that would have taken place would have been in the early to mid 80s, when the Broadway neighborhood began to establish itself. And there were some key people in the neighborhood that saw the opportunities that were there to rebuild and renovate these historic homes, create an identity, and move forward to say that, this is a model for what Rock Island can be for other neighborhoods. And the big thing there at the time was a rezoning request by the neighborhood to the city, saying, right now we are multifamily, and these homes in this neighborhood was built typically as a single-family neighborhood. But over the years, between 1880s and 1940s, it evolved from single-family to multiple-family homes because there was a housing shortage, and especially during pre-World War II and World War II era, the number of the homes were divided up into apartments. And so the city, when they imposed zoning on the neighborhoods, said we've got multifamily here now, it should stay that way. The Broadway neighborhood said that's contrary to what the history of this neighborhood really was. And so the neighborhood petitioned for a zoning change from multifamily back to 1 and 2 family, which is really traditionally what the neighborhood had been. And that was something that was really eye-opening for city council, and I think eye-opening for the city from the perspective of policy change. And it brought the neighbors together and really motivated them to push for this change, saying, we think it's in the best interest of our investment in the neighborhood as a place to live and for the city long term to build on this momentum of history, architecture, and lower density, and really support people's investment in their homes. And ultimately, the rezoning, the downzoning was approved. And I think that really started the trend in the city to build those connections between residents and City Hall again that had fallen into disrepair.
So my grandpa's Bob Morris. Was he involved in that?
He was, yes.
Was he? I don't know if
Bob
that was.
Let me think. I think he would have been on city council about that time, maybe just before then.
Because I think he was really into the Broadway district, and I don't know if you liked him or didn't like him, but he was always just very active and like cooking up a plan, and and I think he was also with the Star Building in downtown Rock Island.
Okay.
Really wanted I think there was some proposal to tear that down, and he really wanted it to stay intact and to preserve some of the downtown structures. And
Bob was an interesting person, and at the council has personalities as a group, and those have changed over time, as you would expect, based on as the people that are elected positions change. And Bob was maybe not a lone voice in the wind, but he was certainly someone that took a different perspective, as I recall. And just fleeting memories of him and the role he played to try to influence city council decisions. I don't remember the specific issue that you raised about the Star Block, but I think the point you raised generally is that we need to appreciate what we've got around us and make sure that it's stabilized or supported in some way so that it doesn't deteriorate. And there's a phrase in historic preservation called demolition by neglect, which obviously is a case where if you don't maintain something, entropy occurs and things will begin to deteriorate. And over time, it gets to the point where it's unsalvageable. And then we're at the tipping point of we are going to lose this resource because it's so far gone, and the economics of it don't support reinvestment to renovate it and salvage it. So let's look around, see what we've got, recognize what we've got, appreciate it, and make sure that it stays because it's part of our cultural history and heritage that we should try to maintain.
And part of economic development, the placemaking, the
Absolutely.
Neighborhoods people drive through and think are attractive, preserving even natural settings where there's nothing on it. It's just a park or a green space. But I feel like preservation is difficult for a lot of people. We think about some of the oldest areas of Rock Island also being the lowest income areas of Rock Island. So if we talk about the West End, there was a statistic that just came out that 46% of people are living in poverty. And so that lack of preservation as entropy or demolition, how do cities support people in because even just preserving our home, okay, actually I have a beef to pick with you because...
okay, fair enough. Not that I can do anything about it, but okay.
I'm teasing. But the Preservation Society did a tour of homes.
Yeah.
You know how you take pictures and you put out a little booklet and then people can drive around, or it's a walking tour.
Right.
So they did one in our neighborhood. So on the booklet, it's our house, but I'm in the driveway bending over, and it's my backside that's facing the camera. And so it was really funny when it happened, because I'm like, why didn't they wait a second for me to stand up before they took the picture of my house? But
I'm sorry to hear that.
No, I'm teasing. But, keeping homes up, especially older homes, there's a crack in the foundation. Yeah. There's a driveway that needs to be repaired. It is so expensive. Yeah. And so how do you, is it the role of a city to have programs that helps people who are lower income preserve neighborhoods and areas that are falling into disrepair? I mean, what is the struggle there of the desire to preserve, running up into the reality of people who don't have the funds to eat or take their medication, let alone reside their house in a way that is consistent with the time of, when that house was built? Yeah.
And the general statement that you made, or the more specific statement you've made about older homes needing, tender loving care and investment, and people may not have the resources, it's certainly true, but it applies to everybody effectively. Not everybody has all the resources they need to maintain what they've got. It's a question of can they do that, maintain and sustain that. The folks that are in the worst off positions or lower income may or may not own their homes. If they're renting, that then it falls back to the property owners to make sure that they're maintaining them properly. And so, from a policy perspective, I think there is a responsibility for government, and it's a question of which level of government then steps in and provides resources that may assist somebody to either maintain or improve or enhance or maintain the stability of their properties. If a furnace goes out and it's wintertime, obviously, chances are your furnace isn't going to go out in the summertime. You're not going to know that. I think there's an opportunity there for the city to help someone to a degree to make that investment so they can stay in their homes, be safe, so it's safe and habitable. And one of the things that I was responsible for at the city was the Community Development Block Grant Program. And so we received about $1.5 million a year from the federal government, passed through the feds, through to the city, going through the HUD office in Chicago, which may or may not exist at this point. I think it's been phased out or it's been downsized significantly. But we had programs available to help people in need for furnace repair, a water or sewer break that may have occurred, a roof program, in the situations where they were unable to pay for that themselves directly. And it could have either been a direct grant or a forgivable loan or a repayable loan based on their income and family size. So I think that is a responsibility for government to help sustain people's ability to stay in their homes, be safe, live there, enjoy their lives, recognize that they don't have unlimited resources and disposable income to take care of problems as they arise. So I think, again, it's, in my mind, that's a function of government.
Do we still do that?
To a limited degree, and I know there are waiting lists. We always had waiting lists, and I think the city still has waiting lists on the programs that do exist. I think the level of funding that the city has now is reduced from where we had seen it in the past, and I think my fear is that will continue to erode, and some of the support systems and safety nets that are out there are clearly eroding at this point, or just being ripped apart and eliminated. And I think there's going to be short and long-term implications for that from a standpoint of the well-being of the country.
Yeah. Do you feel, Thurgood used this word in our interview, and I really appreciated it. I hadn't heard it before. But do you feel like there have been extractive partners in the housing development world? And the way he used that is there's so many dollars floating around for stuff. Mm-hmm. And there are almost entities that are wise to how do you use those dollars? How do you capture them? What cities are going to be eligible? What areas? Mm-hmm. They come in, they do development, and they have kind of an extractive quality, mm-hmm. where after the development project, the entities that seem to be better off are maybe the developers, the person who built it, but not the actual people who mm-hmm. live in Rock Island. Do you think a lot of the housing and development stuff is extractive by nature? Am I exaggerating that when I say that, or?
it wouldn't be an exaggeration necessarily. I think there are folks out there that do take advantage of the situations, the programs, the incentives that are there. They're good at it, and that's what they're making money at, and they do get rich off of it. There are also a number of people or companies, corporations that have better value systems and recognize that they're in it not just for their own personal benefit, but also to support the community where they're investing, and not just to extract the money out of that neighborhood or that building or those people who are paying them their rent or that mortgage or whatever it may be. And I think, we've seen examples here on both sides of that coin. I'll take an example I know that you've been working on and concerned about, which is the Century Woods property of late and where it is now. And I'll think back when I first came to town, the city actually took ownership of Century Woods from the Housing Authority. So we were able to put money in to renovate it at the time, back in the early 1980s. And it was stable at that point. There were over 300 units of housing at Century Woods. And Arsenal Courts.
Is the history of that property, Arsenal Courts was built in like the 1940s, mm-hmm. maybe as part of everything going on after the Depression, or was it part of the New Deal? Or
it was built in the early 40s. It was for wartime housing. There was a housing shortage.
Yeah.
And there were workers that were needed at the Arsenal. And so there were a number of properties that were built like that and similar to that in the Illinois Quad Cities.
So it was housing for folks who worked on the Arsenal?
Yeah, predominantly.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And then it transitioned once that need was no longer there. Maybe those folks moved out, and then you have all these housing units, mm-hmm. and over time it turns into low-income housing?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly when it transitioned from the Arsenal-related employees and families. But over time, as a government housing property, then you had the folks that became a low-income project. And it was financed by Housing and Urban Development. They paid for the maintenance and upkeep, and people living there paid a portion of their income as rent for the property. And so it became public housing in a more, a more current standpoint of what we think of as public housing. When you think of some of the projects in Chicago or New York or Philadelphia, that was our version at our scale here in Rock Island is what it became. And so it was housing for folks that had few other options, and were paying very limited amount of their income to live there. Again, it was deteriorating and needed an uplift in the early 80s, and the city was able to step in and do that at the time. But over the next 15 to 20 years, it went through another cycle of decline. And the Housing Authority was managing the property. The city owned it. Now, just as a point of clarification, the Housing Authority is not a city organization. It's not a city agency. Mm-hmm. The city appoints members to the Rock Island Housing Authority, but does not manage their day-to-day operations or how they operate. So the city really had limited influence over how the Housing Authority operated Arsenal Courts at the time. And it deteriorated to the point that there were gang and drug issues there. The occupancy rate was, I think, maybe 60%. So you had nearly half the units empty because they were either too far gone for people to live in them. There was no money to fix them up again and make them livable, or people really didn't want to live there because it wasn't safe. And so the city then stepped in the late 80s, early 90s, and decided that there should be an upgrade. There should be a renovation. Well, when I went to city council, there were multiple options that were identified. Everything ranging from renovate the entire property to the opposite extreme, which was tear it down completely, that it was too far gone. And ultimately, after a prolonged public policy discussion and multiple city council meetings, city council voted to demolish Arsenal Courts completely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I was given the privilege of working on that project by one of the former city managers, John Phillips, who was here for 25 years. I worked for John. He came in the mid-1980s and retired in 2011. John was kind enough to say, go figure out how to make this work and identify what the options are. So it wasn't just me individually, but it was part of a team effort. But I was the lead from the city standpoint. And so what we ultimately did was provide options to city council. Again, what they decided was, from a policy standpoint, tear it down and do something else on the property. The residents actually used Prairie State Legal Services, and they stepped in and filed a class action suit against the city.
Wow.
Yeah. And that went through a prolonged negotiation process. Ultimately, the city agreed to a consent decree, because this is a federal trial. And I'll put it simply, saying that the city would have lost if it had gone to trial, because the facts were not evident that the city's position of tear it down was supported by evidence of that the resources were available to do something about it, change management, potentially change ownership, modify the property, put public funds into the property, and do something other than saying we're going to dislocate all these folks that are still living there and tear the structures down. So the city ultimately decided that the consent decree would result in a selective demolition. And in the 1990s, we'd hired a firm to analyze how that could be done. And the options were to do a partial demolition and renovation, kind of reduce the density that was there. And city council did decide to do that, and we spent probably $7 or $8 million, I think it was, to undertake that project.
City funds?
It was city funds. It was a general obligation bond, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
With support from HUD, and so yeah, it was a public investment. It was a sizable public investment.
And that took it from, is that when the transition happened, where it went from like 400 units or 354 down to the 230?
Yeah, I think it was 305 down to 230.
230, where it sits today?
Yeah, and then it changed the streetscape. It created the park area in the center, created an administration building. So all that was took place at that time.
And I'm not an expert on any of this, but from research I've done with looking at other public housing layouts across the country, that the examples of successful ones, the way that Century Woods is laid out is actually really great. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's green space, there's separate buildings, there's a park at one end, there's buildings to do other things like meet as a community, have classrooms. So the physical layout of the place is good.
Yeah.
And the buildings are actually quite beautiful from the outside. I mean, when you're driving around and stuff, it's like, this is cool. Mm-hmm. This is a cool part of history. It is the preservation of something old and historic. And it's really unfortunate that it's just the human management of it that seems to always go wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there's truth to what you've said. You know, they were built, they were solid, they were brick, obviously, exteriors. I think the systems need to be upgraded. You know, the plumbing, the heating, the ventilation systems, and the density at the time when it was built was okay, but that became less positive over time. And so, reducing the density, eliminating some of the units, and renovating the apartments became a positive. So I agree with you completely that the park, the administration building, the community building, the meeting room, the police substation that was there early on after the renovation was completed, all those things were positive. It also created an opportunity which was initially a battle between city and community of, we're going to tear everything that you know down, and you're going to have to figure out where else to live. We'll help you figure out where else to live because we're required to by federal law, but you're going to be displaced. to the point where, okay, now it's been renovated. We're bringing a new management team in to take care of the property, and things are going to change and change for the better. And so it became a much more stable place in the neighborhood, not just for, the name change from Arsenal Courts to Century Woods, but as it has having an impact on the Douglas Park neighborhood nearby, on the Longview area nearby, Old Chicago neighborhood. It had a spillover effect and it's kind of a stabilizing impact on the community. And we saw reduction in crime, reduction in gang activity, and people actually got engaged with Century Woods and its management as a place to live. And that was different from the way it had been the prior 2 decades.
So these things kind of cycle through. So there was a time when people were more engaged, thinking about it. Eyeballs being on something makes a really big difference. Mm-hmm. And then eyeballs turn away, people are distracted by other things, and it falls into disrepair again. Is that the cycle of how these things tend to operate?
It seems that way. Yeah, and then so it's interesting because, again, your active engagement now with Century Woods, once again, given the issues that have now arisen again there of late. So we had the management change in the 90s, and then ultimately we sold the property. The city sold the property to the folks that were managing it. It was the folks out of Crystal Lake, Illinois, and it was Bob Rolwing is the guy's name.
Okay.
And he owned and operated both Century Woods and Heather Ridge Apartments in Southwest Rock Island.
Right.
And they had a very strong management team. There was a woman named Trish Larson, who I'd worked with during the renovation, knowing that they were going to take over the management as we went through the improvements. And she was no nonsense. She was the rules of property management are this, and if you don't buy them, then you're not going to be living here. And it was a matter of consistent application of the rules. Yeah, and creating boundaries and knowing people understanding what they were, and if you're going to live here, this is how you're going to live here. We'll also provide support services for you, and then ultimately Bob sold the property and sold it to Millennial Housing.
Okay, so were you still?
I was not with the city then.
Because that didn't happen until like 2017?
Yeah, it was after I had retired.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they had so the property had been maintained, but it needed another influx, another injection of funding. That happens. As property age, you need, as we talked about before, you need to maintain things. And at some point in time, there needs to be a more major investment. So
and for
Bob
those who
old.
who might not be following this story separately, kind of on the website, this company Millennia owned about 220 of these types of properties across the country, mm-hmm. and there were allegations that the CEO, this Frank Sanito, that they were basically like embezzling or skimming mm-hmm. off the top, maybe up to $5 million. So I think there's pending litigation, but in the meantime, Millennia has been debarred and suspended from being a HUD operating entity. Yeah. And even though Century Woods wasn't a part of the they kind of got 19 of these housing places together in order to kind of go after Millennia. Century Woods wasn't one of them. Mm-hmm. However, it's very likely that similar practices were going on at Century Woods. Mm-hmm. And actually, when I was working with Thurgood to run for mayor, that's when I first kind of got involved. Mm-hmm. But it was really difficult because when you would try to engage the city to say, hey, there's weird stuff going on. Mm-hmm. Like a bunch of dishwashers and ovens and stuff came on a truck last week and now they're gone. And the property, as they're renovating, it's mm-hmm. like stuff came in and then the residents would say, yeah, they told us it's going to a property in Mississippi. And, you just start thinking like, that's so weird. Yeah. Why would you bring all this stuff here and then immediately move it out? And just the way the renovations got slowed down. But then it was like COVID happened. So mm-hmm. there was a little bit of okay, we understand that things aren't happening on a timeline. I don't know. So you just wonder, like, what was going on at Century Woods? Yeah. But I will say it was really hard to get involved because when I had talked to people with the city, it was very much a response of like, that's a private company. There's nothing we can do. Mm-hmm. We can't really help you advocate on behalf of the folks mm-hmm. who live there. And so getting re-involved, it's been so cool to have Mayor Harris, because I think maybe even just being new to politics is like, oh, well, there's humans who aren't being treated fairly here. Of course, we'll try to do everything we can to help. And so it was really neat that like we held a meeting at Century Woods, and the city manager came and the mayor came and different alder people came. And just that all by itself, no policies have changed. Nothing is different. I do think that in the last 6 weeks, stuff has changed at the property. I mean, they have, the management company is starting to send out a newsletter. They're working on a schedule for when inspections will happen. People have gotten some long-standing issues that weren't fixed. So it's like when a city says, like, there's nothing we can do, paying attention is something.
Yeah.
Caring is actually something. Mirroring back to residents that you are valuable and loved members of our community, and your housing conditions matter, and you're not alone. And even though we can't choose who owns this place right now, we don't have that power. People with power showing up and saying, you know, we're here with you, we're alongside you, actually has like a really significant influence, even though no policy has changed, even though just attention. And I do feel a little bit bad, because the way we got that attention was to put out negativity about this place on the internet. And I hate that attention economy is kind of how you do that. And I would like to publicly say that I really have nothing against the individuals who work for these companies and are there on site, I'm sure trying to do the best they can. I'm sure they are good people, and they're just showing up to, you know, pay their bills. And I want to partner with them and with residents to just keep attention there, keep momentum there, fix problems like since May, people don't have working smoke detectors. It's not hateful to say that. It's not like you're a bad person.
No.
Because this resident doesn't have working smoke detectors. It's like everyone knows that's a problem. Let's just fix it and get all the egos out of the way, including my own.
If only it was that simple.
But I think attention, like you talked about the renaissance of the property in the late 80s, 90s, it was a time of attention and then trying to stay connected. And I think that's why a tenants association is so important, and that's been the main focus of late, because it provides an entity on site that meets regularly and continues to pull attention, summarize issues, gets community going on site with tenants who live there. Maybe I'm just such an optimist, but the way the property is structured, I feel like Century Woods could be this model for like, how do you help people at this point in time when this is a place where they need to live, to regroup, to figure out what they want to do with their lives, to form a basis for going off and, you know, living their own dreams. How do you make this a launching pad for that? And how do you do wraparound services from a community to just show the people living there, like, you're believed in and you're valuable and you've got business ideas and you have hopes and dreams for your children, and how does this community support that? Maybe that's Pollyannish, but
No. It sets the stage for where government can have a positive impact on people's lives, and the strategies that should be out there that government and city employees or government employees recognize the value of the people that they are working for and with, and look to try to support them. You know, you've raised a number of incredibly good, valid points about the example of Century Woods and where it is now from where it was previously, and kind of the cycle that it's gone through, and the red flags that clearly were present that you've been describing, and where the city does have a responsibility to respond to its residents who are raising legitimate issues, and whether or not there's a direct role that the city can play. The indirect role is as important as well, equally as important, because it does change people's perspective of what government can and can't or should or shouldn't do.
And that's, I guess, where you get into all the nerdy code stuff. I mean, I've been watching and listening to all the city council meetings, and it's this ordinance over here, and really enforcing code violations, I think. Well, I have to cough.
You said you're recovering
I
from a
am.
cold. So.
I can edit out my any coughing. But isn't it through like the things you were writing when you moved here? These code violation ordinances. Sorry, Alan.
No problem. Codes are a means to implement policy. Mm-hmm. And so how do you structure them so that they're reasonable?
While you're talking, I'm going to grab a cough drop. Real coughing part. So I interrupted you because I was having a coughing fit.
No problem.
But a lot of this is through these ordinances and ways that you try to have, carrots and sticks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, City Council sets policy, and one of the jokes we always had, one of the cliches I use frequently is I'll raise the question, what's city policy? And the answer to that question was 4 votes on a Monday night. Because what council approves becomes policy, and then it becomes a matter of how do you take that policy and translate that into a working document of rules, regulations, ordinances, standards that implement what that policy is. And that's one of the things that staff is responsible for doing. You take what the thought is, the direction, the viewpoint, and turn that into a working document, if you will, of how do you implement that policy.
Yeah, sorry. I'm so sorry.
And that's a challenge.
And city councilors don't always. That's one thing as I've kind of paid more attention. It's like we have a weak mayor system, mm-hmm. and so the mayor, at the end of the day, doesn't have a lot of power. He doesn't get a vote. The city manager is really running the city, and the city staff are the ones developing the policy, creating things for city council to review, and then you have your elected representatives who are saying yay or nay. Mm-hmm. Are city councilors directing city management what they would like to see, or does do the city employees, the city manager, are they really deciding with their education and tools, how they want an ordinance to be written or what they want to do? Like one that's up right now is about the controversy around community gardens. Mm-hmm. So is that coming from city council saying, here's what my constituents are saying, write an ordinance for me? Or is it the team on the city saying, here's what we think, we're going to present it to council? Okay, I'm going to...
The answer to the question is probably yes, and it varies by what the subject matter may be. There are times when an individual city council member may have been at a workshop or a conference and saw a program or an ordinance or an initiative that appealed to them and seemed to respond to a need that exists here in Rock Island, whether it be housing related or environmental or economic development incentive program or housing program, whatever it may be, and brings that back to typically to the city manager or other council members and say, yeah, I was exposed to this. I think this might be a good idea. Is this something that seems to fit with what our thinking is? That gets then translated into, is there a consensus of council that tells the city manager, go have staff research this, figure out how to do this, and bring a report back to us. There are times that happens. There are times that an issue may arise in the community that residents bring to the council that then translates into council telling staff, go figure out how to respond to this. Or it may be a case where staff is looking at the comprehensive plan for the city or the strategic plan for the city and recognizing that these are the priorities that council has identified. We need to prepare reports relative to these subjects, this subject matter, and bring that back to the city council, not with necessarily one solution, but here are the options that the council can look at to then develop a consensus of city council of here's the direction that we think we should go, here's some of the nuances relative to that policy, and go write the final ordinance. So it comes back for conversation and approval.
Did you ever have anything come up, ordinances around what's happening right now with the moratorium on certain types of social services? Some sort of an ordinance being written to limit, homeless services, food pantries. Mm-hmm. Did anything like that ever come up when you were working for the city?
Let me think about that for a moment.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do.
This, yeah,
I do. I'm aware of that.
Do you follow all? Are you like?
I can't help myself.
Okay, so you still pay attention and you follow what's going on. And...
For a couple of reasons. One, I'm still interested in what the city is doing, how they're doing things. Also, as a member of the Preservation Society, I serve as the treasurer to the Rock Island Preservation Society. I'll look at the city council agenda and identify if there are any issues that apply to the preservation component of the city and something that may affect Preservation Society in some way. So I'll review that and then provide a quick summary to the Linda Anderson, the president of Preservation Society, and Diane A. Strike, who's the secretary of the group. So I still keep my finger in. I don't watch the city council meetings. I try not. I've only attended a few for some other specific reasons, but I'm still concerned about the city.
Yeah.
I mean, having spent this many years here. So I'm aware of what they've done of late and concerns about the homeless population, homeless services, and kind of the concentration occurring in downtown. And I'm trying to think then to your question of was there an issue that the city council then took action that had a fairly significant or potentially significant impact on a selected population. I mean, the discussion of the Arsenal Court, Century Woods was certainly a key one. I don't remember, a moratorium necessarily that resulted.
Is it a bold move? Is it kind of, because to me, I don't know. I'm such a rigid person in some ways, but it's like, okay, you have to ground yourself in your principles, and then you should make choices out of your values. And so sometimes when I watch city council, I feel like I'm spinning because I'm like, wait a second. When it comes to the Mylan Bottoms project, it's like, well, we can't tell people where to do business. You have to let business owners go where they choose to go. Yeah. So there's this stance that's taken there. And then with this third place, it's this, we need to be involved in where things go and regulate them in order to do city planning. We have to be intentional. Yep. And so then it seems like a difference or the fire detector, the sprinkler thing.
Sprinkler, yeah.
So it's like, at first I was like, well, I don't think people should really be told they have to have a sprinkler because let those individual homeowners choose for themselves. But then I talked to some city council people and they were like, if we save one life, it's worth it. And so I was like, okay, well, I don't care about this issue that much. So sure, keep the sprinkler thing because the city council is taking this stand that saving one human life is worth this regulation. But then they're like, let's do this moratorium. And all these professionals are coming out to say, during this moratorium, someone could die. There could be a period of one person at the public comment said a woman seeking shelter was assaulted in the process of not having a place to stay. So then I'm like, wait a second. I thought that we were just one human life is worth this, so you get kind of this back and forth of what principles as a group are you grounding yourselves in for the identity and the vision and the spirit of what our city is and who we are. And that drives me nuts because I'm just, wait, I thought you said you were operating this way. I mean, you've been around it for a long time, so you've probably been frustrated for a long time. And I really like our city council. I think in general, we've got a good group. They're doing the best they can. It's not to throw shade on anyone. It's just be consistent with, have an overarching vision that's consistent. Yeah.
And that, the cliche would be, life is a compromise. And you can have basic standards and moral principles that you think are unshakable until something arises. And as a parent, as a community member, we try to do our best to instill values, positive values in our kids, and positive values in how the community functions. But then there's always the exception that arises, or the case of, on balance, I need to kind of lean this way on this decision because it's having an unintended consequence. And I need to recognize that and say, under these limited circumstances, I think I need to move in this direction. So, take the sprinkler ordinance as an example. I agree from a life safety standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. From a real impact on the community and the city's ability to promote in new investment and creation of building new houses, it's difficult enough to get builders to commit in Rock Island to build new homes anyway. Adding the additional value of the sprinkler system and saying now the buyer is going to have to absorb that cost makes it Rock Island less competitive in the market that's out there, given that we're already at a competitive disadvantage in the Quad Cities right now for a variety of reasons that are very complicated. There's nothing simple about them. So my perspective would have been, okay, I think the sprinkler system has value. It should go in effect, but only unless the balance of the Quad Cities also enact a similar ordinance, so that we've got a relatively comparable and level playing field, if you will. Not to diminish the implication that saving life is critical. It is, but we need to recognize the other implications of this. So it always tends to be a balance. Relative to the homeless situation or the homeless services situation, that's one where the population exists. They're not going to go away. And there are very complicated reasons why the homeless population exists, and they're not all the same. I mean, you've got substance abuse, you get mental illness, you've got financial issues, you've got abuse issues, physical abuse issues, you've got family issues. Those are not the same. And so putting a moratorium on does not make the problem go away. You've got folks that are providing services now that continue to be able to provide services. I'm not sure what the moratorium solves necessarily.
They said at this point the reason they kept it in place was because they need a few months to write a new ordinance around licensing these types of facilities in Rock Island, which hasn't existed before. Mm-hmm. And I own a mental health place in Rock Island, so I don't know if I'll be subject to that as well. And so, here we're going to lift something for new development in a housing place around safety with removing the sprinkler requirement. But now we're going to lay down a new regulation on humans wanting to take care of other humans in a time when, over the next 2 years at least, people are going to need more help than ever. Yeah. So it is complicated, but...
And the ideal situation would be that there would be a Quad City approach to dealing with the homeless population.
And the environment and the sprinklers.
Yeah, clearly.
I feel like that's a special tricky spot for us, is that we live in the Quad Cities. So it's a wonderful thing, this regional identity, and that they're 400,000 people. But it also makes it hard when you have a lower median income than the rest of your neighbors and are tasked with doing some of these jobs, but you don't have regional support. It's hard. Yeah.
One of the things that we always prided ourselves on when I was with the city was that we were able to do more with less. We were always
That's what Don Wooten said. He said about Mayor Schwiebert, that leadership, we could do so much with less than our neighbors. We were efficient. Yeah. And you believe that's true?
Absolutely. And I think part of it gets back to the teamwork that was in place at the time when I had worked with the city, and how we were not out to build our own mini empires. We were not out to appease or respond to the needs of our own egos. It was a case of looking at things from a broad perspective of how do we help the city of Rock Island achieve, progress, compete, enhance itself, and be reasonable about our solutions to the problems that are out there. Recognizing that the problems that exist with racial tensions that would have existed, or socioeconomic conditions that were problematic, where folks were at battle, literally battling each other, and not bury our heads in the sand and say, how do we begin to address these concerns? And I think that's shifted over the last 10 years or 15 years or so in the community. And it's become more complicated too, with kind of the change in international perspective on politics and people and relationships and anonymous impact of the internet that has really, I think, degraded the way in which people relate to one another.
Yeah. Unfortunately,
but that's there. But regardless of that being there, how do we then function locally and have an positive impact on people? And it's becoming more challenging. Not that people need to be mobilized and engaged when there's a problem, whether it's at Century Woods or the Mile and Bottom situation or the general homeless population concern and the services supporting them. But is there a team that's out there that's responding to it in a way that is having an impact, or at least raising a debate for the issue that is leading towards some kind of a solution? And I'm not sure that an ordinance is always necessarily the solution.
Well, I think it's an unfortunate byproduct that we have this attention economy. Exactly what I was saying with Century Woods, that in order to get the attention, you have to engage in the things that get attention, these days. And it's often communities that have less power that have to engage in that kind of public storytelling, or even feeling like you're going to a city council meeting and pleading or yelling or being very upset because there aren't avenues to be listened to otherwise, or maybe it feels that way. And oftentimes, whatever entity you're up against, for whether that be millennia, I mean, you can't talk to them. They're not calling you back.
No, of course
They're not
not
helping the people who live there. You can't really talk to HUD. You can't. I mean, I was just trying to organize a meeting at Century Woods the other day, and they called the police on me. It's to leave the property, which has really put a little bit of a difficulty in doing things there the last couple weeks.
Sure.
So, folks who show up to the meeting and have to kind of scream into the void, and then like city council doesn't really or can't really say anything back, and then the other interests that are being represented aren't there, so there's not the communication of like, well, we're compromising. This moratorium is a compromise, but with who, and where are they, and
who speaks for them?
And maybe these conversations are going on in other locations behind closed doors, and that's all fine and good. But that can also make the rest of the population feel like, well, but I'm not included in that.
Right.
I don't know who those people are or where the decisions, it can feel less transparent, or And I don't know how it would have been different in the 80s or 90s. Were there more meetings? Were there more breakfasts that people went to? Like, because now it is like, how do I get your attention online to care about the thing that I care about?
Right. Yeah. And that's the venue for communication. I'll go back to a couple points from a historical perspective. One of which is fairly vivid. I can't even remember the details of the conversation, but you mentioned Thurgood earlier, where Thurgood's dad, Terry, was a city council member. Well, Terry was, before he was a city council member, was a community activist. And during the Arsenal Courts situation, I was at a meeting in the old admin building on the property, which is still there.
Yeah.
And we were having a community meeting trying to explain what the city council had decided and where the city was moving. I think it was at the point that the consent decree was in process. And I was trying to explain how things would change and would change for the better. Terry took exception to my perspective on that. And I'm a fairly calm person and try to maintain a professional demeanor. We were going toe-to-toe, just screaming at each other. And I felt, it's like, how did I let myself lose control? Well, it's because we were so engaged. It was so important to me professionally, personally. It was so important to Terry and the folks that he was representing at Arsenal Courts at the time that it generated that emotion. And now we're doing our screaming, in some cases face to face, but more often than not digitally. And that, it's not the same. You don't have that same emotional reaction and attempt at resolution because you're not there physically facing someone.
Yeah.
And you can't resolve that problem.
Well, and
personally.
And obviously you don't want to scream at anyone, But also in a marriage, in a family, it would be weird if you never got upset, and so people in relation to one another do get upset and they do say things in anger. Yeah. And what happened to your relationship after that? I mean, was it fractured forever? Did you have a resolution to that?
We ultimately, reached a resolution, and Terry and I are friends. We respect one another. We respect that we've got differing perspectives on certain subjects, but that's okay. We reached, it definitely was a resolution. He recognized that I was implementing city council policy. I was doing my job. I recognized that he was representing constituency that was voiceless to some degree and needed to be responded to. So we understood that we needed to take a step back and think about things from each other's perspective and recognize where we were coming from and why that was the case.
Yeah. But the unifying principle there is passion for a city.
Yeah.
And
Clearly.
The passion is good.
Yeah.
It's kind of like we need people to care so deeply that they can raise their voice a little bit, and doing that in person in a small group in a place where you can maybe have some other people there to mediate and support is so powerful. And if we lose that, we're lost.
No, there's no question. And people need to be engaged in some way in the community. More than not, people get engaged when there's a crisis. That's what motivates them. Other than that, it's a case of, things are going okay. Well, that's true for a lot of the population, but for a significant number of people, they're in crisis every day. And the city government needs to be responsive to that in some way, looking at whether it be health and safety, whether it be crime, whether it be schools and how their kids are being educated, job opportunities, impacts of public policy on workplaces, whether relative to discrimination or workplace safety. Government plays a role in that and needs to play a role in that.
And it's almost like the frog in the pot of boiling water. I mean, over time, if you think about when you moved here, are the citizens of Rock Island better off? Especially in our parts of our community that struggle more? Has the picture gotten more bleak, or is there a lot of upward mobility?
I think back, and another example of engaging with people. So I mentioned earlier that city received federal dollars from Community Development Block Grant, CDBG funds. And at one point, Vince Thomas, who you've probably heard Vince's name, he's the director of project now for a long time community activist. He and some other people filed an administrative complaint with HUD in Chicago against the city for improperly spending block grant dollars. That was the nature of the divide between City Hall and residents. And I was managing that program at the time and put together a response saying, here's the issues they've raised, and we're following the rules. The rules say we can do these things, we're doing these things. But the broader issue was, are we doing things that are most responsive to the needs that exist in the community or not? And that translated into, ultimately, the administrative complaint was dropped saying, no, you're not violating federal regulations. Okay, good thing. But at the local level, are we doing the right thing?
Ooh.
And how do we build that bridge between City Hall, city staff, and the community? And then it was, later, would have been the late 80s, 90s, when we started to get into neighborhood planning and get people, the neighbors, the residents involved in making decisions about their neighborhood, their community, relative to housing, streets, street lighting, zoning, housing programs that respond to the physical needs that they've got in their neighborhoods. And so that became a process that resulted in, so I think, significant changes in how people thought about Rock Island and Rock Island city government as being progressive, being concerned, being open to listening to people's perspectives. And I think that's changed within the last 10 years, 10, 15 years, and gone the other direction again.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you say that when you were back in that day, more was controlled by the city? Like, I think some of our economic development and development stuff we now outsource to Dari or to the downtown. I mean, and I'm not saying they're good or bad, but when you're thinking about how community block grant funds are being used, is there more of a tendency now to say, we'll engage this other entity, this third party to administer that, or not so much? I don't know.
It's really complicated. And so because it's complicated, you need to marshal forces to respond to the issue that's out there. If it's economic development, it needs to be multiple partnerships. And there's only so much time, energy, and effort that city employees can put to a given project activities because they're juggling multiple jobs and activities and projects at the same time.
So those types of partnerships have always existed?
To a degree, yes. There was a group called the Quad City Development Group that was kind of the regional economic development entity that existed, which then morphed ultimately into what's now there used to be separate chambers of commerce for each community. There was a Rock Island Chamber, there was a Moline Chamber, there was a Davenport Chamber. They then became the Illinois Quad City Chamber of Commerce. But that took a long period of time, and people compromising their position in the community to become part of an entity that's greater than them, recognizing the long-term benefit. So it's always been a matter of partnerships. So, back in the 80s, when downtown Rock Island was looking at creating the Arts and Entertainment District, it was a case of creating the Growth Corporation that was the model for implementing that Arts and Entertainment District. So the Growth Corporation was kind of an economic development arm. The Arts and Entertainment District was focusing on downtown, and that recognized that the city could not be the all-do-all of everything for everyone in every way, but there are other partners out there that you contract with that get things accomplished, and that you've got a common agenda and a common set of ideals and policies and direction that you're trying to accomplish and implement and do the job, do the work. And I think that's still the case now. And so I don't necessarily say that contracting out, if you will, functions is a bad thing. Depends on who it is that you're contracting with and what the nature of the details of the deal are that you've got with them.
Yeah, so I'm thinking of that language, partnering, instead of saying contracting out. Who are your partners and what have you engaged them to do? And then maybe having some sort of ongoing relationship where you're making sure you're checking back in to say, all right, we gave you this amount of money and what were the deliverables, and is this partnership still working? Yeah. So you need private-public partnerships in cities.
Yeah, either public-private or public-nonprofit. I mean, it's a matter of how you structure the entity, whether it is a nonprofit or for-profit corporation or a development corporation or a community development corporation like Augustana just created recently for the Hilltop area.
About Economic Growth Corps? How long have they been on the scene?
40 years probably.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm thinking. Early on, it was the focus of the Growth Corporation initially was economic development, as you recall, and its selling point for Rock Island was water.
Oh, like we have a lot of water around us? Okay.
We have water that is available, it's accessible, it's not going to dry up. We have the ability to provide water to industries that may need large volumes of water, and we've got it. And so that was the impetus of the Growth Corporation initially under its first director, but that then morphed into the kind of the multi-tiered Development Association, the Arts and Entertainment District, and then the Growth Corporation, which was more of the housing-oriented development. So you had that Renaissance Rock Island umbrella that you probably have heard about since you've been here, of those three prongs and a fork, and called DARI. And those partnerships really were positive over the years. I mean, it was the people involved in those organizations working with city staff really were able to accomplish some incredible things. There was a huge synergy there among the people involved. John Phillips, the city manager, Mark Schwiebert as mayor, Dan Carmody was the director of Renaissance Rock Island. Brian Hollenbeck ultimately became the housing person, but even before Brian, it was Bob Yap.
Okay.
And Bob had done a fair number of things. So, it was the people involved and their visions, their skills, and their tools that they could bring to make a difference, and that worked for quite a while.
I always get confused by all the different entities and the umbrellas that they sit under, and because DARI is separate from Economic Growth Corps, but they kind of share staff.
Yeah.
And then Economic Growth Corps is a nonprofit,
Yep.
but it has these subsidiaries under it that are the management company, the real estate company, it always confuses me. I'm like, and they've done a lot of projects. They've done Sala Flats, they've done the locks. So, and they're an entity that seems to understand, how do you draw state dollars? How do you use tax credits? How do you kind of get all the money together to do a development? And would you say that overall Sala Flats, the locks, the Star Block, have those been successful projects?
I would say yes, in terms of the broad perspective, absolutely. And what you described is, I think it was, I don't know if it was Brian or Dan first came up with the term, but the layer cake of financing. There's no simple way to put financing together anymore. You've got to identify what the resources are that are out there, bring them to a project to make the pieces fit, and so it's state funding, it's local funding, it's TIF funding from the city, it's federal tax credits or state tax credits, housing mortgage credits, investment tax credits. All those things are out there, and it's what's the best of those incentives that you can bring to the table for a local project. And I think overall, we've got housing in Rock Island that would not have existed otherwise, that probably would have resulted in demolition of those buildings if not for the investment that would have been made. So whether it be Renaissance or Jackson Square or, like I said, Sala, or the new construction at the locks, those wouldn't have happened unless it was for the partnership between city and the nonprofits and the development organizations that are out there.
Yeah, it's I wonder how they could do some of those projects engaging more of the local, either people who are doing the building, or how do you, I don't even know how to say this, but do you ever feel like when you live in a town where there is a lot of poverty, that it's almost like each human is one unit of poverty, and however many units you have, dollars get attached to that. And then there's a bunch of very intelligent, smart, business savvy people who are like, we can use these dollars to do development, which is awesome. But at the end of the development, there is housing there, but we still have the problem, we haven't built any wealth in the part of the community that is suffering the most. We haven't transformed any lives. We have put some roofs over people's heads, which is super important. But I don't know, and I don't even know if what I'm saying is fair.
Yeah.
It might not be. But it's how do you do development that leaves the people who are struggling the most having more intergenerational wealth, or starting their own company to be the one who does the construction, or I don't know.
Yeah. There have been ways to accomplish that over time that's been done successfully, variably, so that you can get folks from the neighborhood that are maybe nearby, where the project, that's the investment's taking place, that can be employees of the company that's doing the work. You can do some outreach. But I think, taking a step back, the key there is having folks that have the basic education and some basic skills that either they have learned through the Rock Island School District, for example, or a trades school opportunity, or whatever training they may have been exposed to, or they have the opportunity for on-the-job training to be able to build those skills, that wealth, and that investment in the community, and that's hard. It's not just the city can't do that unilaterally. Again, it's a matter of the partnerships, and for years I've been trying to strengthen the connection between the school district and the city, and that's happened variably. Administrations change, both in terms of the superintendent or the school board or the mayor and the city council, and they have differing perspectives on how that connection can be made and how to build on it, because they've each got their own functions, their own responsibilities, and limited amounts of time. But I think the city and school district, in my mind, it's critical for them to work as closely together as possible on an ongoing basis and build relationships.
Yeah. What do you think about this idea? This is sometimes when I think about public policy, you think about the community development block grant, you think about the tax credits. Everything is so complicated. It's like we have all these dollars and we're going to move them around and shuffle them through people. What if you just took all that money and gave it to people and let them come up with their own plans and ideas and build their own things, and because there's so many systems that operate around people in poverty that create a lot of jobs for the folks managing the poor people, and create a lot of jobs for the people building things for the poor people. And but what if you just kind of changed the way you did it and gave money to poor people so that they could decide who to hire for a service, how to pool money to get something accomplished? Because my first job was working at Longview, and that would have been like 1995, let's say. Okay. And I was a lifeguard, and that was when it was the old pool, the 50-meter pool.
Yep.
Or I think the measurement was slightly off because they always had to put those blocks in for swim meets.
Okay.
So I had this interesting vantage point. I think it's shaped my life. Sitting on a high lifeguard chair, and to my back was above the hill, and to my front was below the hill. And it was just watching kids kind of funnel into the pool and seeing this really distinct difference in economic prosperity and also like kind of the way those kids were treated. Like even in the 90s, like if a little white kid was being a goofball in the deep end, it was like, boys will be boys. If a little black kid was acting that way, it would be like yanking him out of the pool and having him sit in the corner. So I just got an education in just inequality in our city, and all the programs federally, at the state level, locally, that are designed to change the circumstances of, let's say, at that time, people living below the hill. Never has it been, why don't we just like help those people build wealth and just give them the money and let them do with it what they want to do development. Instead, we just have systems upon systems. I mean, people just, when I was getting my master's in social work, I got my master's actually in social and economic development. Okay. But part of that is learning theory and, the functionality of poverty. That in some ways there's a reason that people stay poor within a system. And it's like there's a reason that maybe people stay sick so that we can fix them and we can create an industry off of that. Yeah. Poverty is an industry in many ways. Yeah. And alleviating poverty would actually put a lot of people out of jobs. A lot of people wouldn't have anything to do, Then they would. There's still
going to be plenty of things out there to do. That's.
But it would be. I wish like one city we could like get an agreement going where just let us pilot it, and we're just going to stop working so hard to not lift. More people are probably poor in parts of Rock Island than were 50 years ago. Yeah. So can we try something different and see what would happen? Yeah. And there have been some studies, I think the fear is like, well, they wouldn't know how to spend their money. They'd mismanage it. Yeah. Research shows that's not true, that people manage their money and they take care of their kids and they get the things that they need.
Yeah, the people with the fewest resources probably have the strongest skills to manage that because they've got so little.
Yeah.
And then by necessity, they have to figure out how to make this work. And people with more disposable income probably waste a whole lot more money than they realize, as opposed to the folks that are in poverty that don't have that money. I think you're touching on part of what they're doing in the West End revitalization with a participatory budgeting process, which say, okay, you've got a pot of money. As community members, what do you think we should do with it? And I know they've come up with some ideas. It's the challenge is always in the details of you've got the concept, you've got identification of what that project may be or that activity, what's it going to cost, who's going to do it, and can you get people from the community to pay themselves effectively to do that? In some cases, I think you can. I think it's a matter of continuing kind of some of the systems that are out there at the same time of modifying the systems so that you can generate some innovative approaches to food co-ops as a model. Are we going to get a major grocery chain to say, I'm going to put a grocery store in the West End of Rock Island?
But so some of that stuff, but if people had money, they would. If there were a bunch of people living in those neighborhoods who had $1,000 extra a month and they need food, they probably, because sometimes I think in a free market economy, I'm a capitalist, like I'm not a socialist.
Sure.
But I think that one way you could do, I like to just come up with my own things, Alan. Think outside the box. But I think of like elastic capitalism. So if you think about a rubber band and how far you can pull it until it pops, that you need a capitalism that has the elasticity to keep us together. Once it starts to get stretched out so that the rich are so rich and the poor are so poor, it's going to snap. And then it'll just fall apart.
Right.
It'll deteriorate.
Yep.
So an elastic capitalism, like for my business, what's best for me is that people have money so that they can buy healthcare services. And, what's best for renters is that there are people who can pay rent. What's best for restaurants is that there are people with cash in their pocket to spend money.
Sure.
And I think we're so afraid as a society to give people cash. So we set up all these systems. We got to have this HUD to manage our housing. We got to have the SNAP program to manage the food. We have to have TANF, temporary assistance to needy families, to manage cash assistance. Like it would be, maybe it just seems like it would be chaos, but what if it's not? What if it just allows people within their own communities without the control of someone like me or you who's like, well, I went to school, so I know how to manage you. And here's what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to set it up. And instead it was like, I am going to trust that you love your kids and that you want a good and beautiful life, and there may be stumbling blocks along the way, but that if I give you this, not me giving it, but if society redistributes wealth in a way where now you get to influence the capitalist system with the cash in your pocket. That's probably too bold, but we're spending the money anyway.
Right. Yeah, it's a question of who has the money and who's spending it on what.
Yeah, it's like we're spending it to manage one unit of poor. Oh, look, I have, in the West End, I have 17,000 units of poor. And how much industry and business can I create off of that? And what would it look like to just take all the money and industry that's created there and the wealth and to say instead, I'm just going to give it to those people in some sort of an experimental way. Maybe the country could look at this model in little pockets of playgrounds, of social stuff, and just see like what would happen. I have a very rich friend in California, and he never responded to me. But I was like, are you rich enough that you could pitch a TV show that would be like, you'd pick 10 cities across the country, and you would have the wealthiest of the wealthy kind of decide to adopt that city and to infuse enough cash to do experiments on how do you really do social, political, economic development. And to have this like hypotheses or to kind of compete like a Super Bowl of cities and to do things very differently according to different ideologies, different plans, if Rock Island was competing, I would say, like, kind of eliminate everything, just give people money and let capitalism do its thing. I don't know how you hold down inflation or, how that part of it would work, but I don't know, Alan, what do you think?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, that's a structural change to society, obviously, and changes like that are difficult.
Yeah.
Clearly. I think, can you do it on an experimental level? Well, perhaps. Is there value to potentially doing that? Yeah. I think there is, whether Rock Island city government is in a position to say we're going to think about going to do that and put a pool of money together. Probably not.
What if we could get a billionaire to give us $1 billion and we could just do the experiment in Rock Island specifically? Maybe that's the point of the podcast. I don't know.
Yeah.
And there's no planning. There's this is going to rub the urban planner.
Go do something.
Yes. And the social worker, we both probably have master's degrees, and it's like, how do you design society? How do you take care of people? But sometimes we might
let people take care of themselves.
Yeah.
And learn how to do that. And as I said, folks that have the most challenges are probably the best suited to figure out how they can structure their lives, because they're in crisis all the time.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out how to do that. So if they've got the resources that take them out of crisis, it's what kind of decisions will they make? And we don't know. We can't play those hypothetical games.
And even our system of charitable giving, you have to give to a nonprofit that's going to manage the resources. Yeah. You can't get a tax credit to just give a human being cash. And that is probably, that's kind of how my husband and I do our giving. We give humans cash.
Okay.
But you can't write it off on your taxes.
No.
But it's
the systems are in place. So it'd be great if we could kind of wipe the Internal Revenue Code slate clean and kind of start from scratch as to, okay, what are we trying to accomplish as a society, as a country, and then write the code that responds to that, or there won't be a code, and we just
simplify it.
Simplifying would be great, but we've had the special interests that have built up over time, generation on generation, make it much more and more complicated. And simplicity is usually the best response to deal with the situation. And I agree with you from a philosophical perspective. From the practical perspective, that's a huge societal change.
I know. It's probably not going to happen, but I always think about elastic capitalism, that your society should be shaped like a diamond, not like a vase with a bubble of poverty at the bottom, and then this long, skinny neck that has the shape of things is kind of getting out of whack.
Yeah.
And
my grandson he's in his late 20s, and he and I have conversations about that of what oligarchy is in charge of what, of who's running things, and the perspective that there's a very small cadre of people or entities that are in control of the resources, of money, and how it's dictated, and how that controls the balance of society, and what are their perspectives on what are their foundational values about life and society and civilization, and how are they manipulating us? And we're not going to reach resolution, but the
do you think are we in an oligarchy now?
I don't think so directly yet, but it's certainly coming. I've always been a fan of
what is
science.
Oligarchy? It's like the rich basically run things. That's the
I've always been a
definition.
fan of science fiction, and science fiction always kind of takes that an issue and takes it to its extreme in some ways, and in some cases. And a lot of science fiction says that there will be these incredibly unbelievably mega rich corporations that are still in competition with one another, but that are controlling virtually, the universe from a science fiction perspective. And is that good for society? So So you've got this very small cadre of folks that are in control. And in the meantime, we as mere ants are trying to get up the anthill in some way. And what are our goals and aspirations, and how do they fit into this viewpoint of this unnamed oligarchy that's in control of us? I don't know.
And what happens when they can do what they need to get done with robots, and they don't need humans, but they do need consumers.
Mm-hmm.
So not everybody can be broke, because at some point they need us to be able to buy the stuff the robots are making for us.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous. Like, being a human is just ridiculous.
Yeah, and there was a picture that I saw not too long ago of the Earth and the Moon from, how far away was it? It was in the New York Times. The orbit of Jupiter, maybe, somewhere out there. And it's just like, we're so insignificant.
I know.
Yet, by the same token, we think we're so in charge of things, and we are so understanding and recognize the universe that we live in. Well, we're not.
I was just talking to my daughter about, because I talked to Rob McCoy last week, so his episode will air today, and he's a pastor. And,
okay.
I'm not a religious church goer. But I was like talking to him about Paradise Lost, which is Milton's long poem about basically like a fallen angel becomes Satan, and I don't know. But my kid and I were just talking about, like, the earth is so weird because it is a paradise. We were planted on this beautiful thing hurling through space. But because of our own humanity, we kind of turn it into a hellscape. There could be like no problems, but our humanness makes us, because we could just all love each other, but we can't, because we're human, and so we have to. Yeah, I don't know. It's
it gets back to some of that tribalism, and we got our network and the people that we're comfortable with, and we want to make sure that we're safe and sound. And it gets back to the basic hierarchy of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we're going to protect ourselves and our those that are around us for that housing and that health and safety. And at some point, we'll begin to think broader about society writ large, but that's a challenge.
So it's like, when there's enough for everyone, which arguably there is now,
Sure.
Will we ever, it's like we have all of our animal DNA living deep inside of us. Why are we afraid of heights? Why do some people in the psychology field, even phobias, can kind of point to these deeply, people are scared of little formations of bubbles or holes. Some people have a real phobia of that, and they can feel this intense feeling of anxiety, and that's probably because that's a nest. And so deep inside of us is kind of this fear of a nest, because what might come out of it. Fear of heights. There weren't always rails to show you that you were about to walk over a cliff. Yeah. So a lot of the deep-seated fears we have are born out of when we lived in a different time, and we needed to have this stuff operating in us like little animals to keep us safe. But our humanity is having consciousness, being able to feel something and then think, maybe I don't want to act that way. To be enlightened in a way that other beings can't. I don't know. Yeah. And will we ever get there, Alan? I don't know. I mean,
I'd like to think that I'm optimistic enough to say that yes, we will get to a point where that may happen. But by the same token, I guess I'm more realistic looking around at where things are now, and it's going to take some kind of a calamity to probably result in that societal change. Because phobia, one of the major phobias that people have is of change. And change is always difficult. And as you were talking about, let's just give people money. Well, that's a huge change, because we've got these systems in place that we're comfortable with, and we know that they work. Well, wait, do they really work? Or they're in place and they've got their steps that you follow. Well, that's working. but what are the impact of those steps, and are they making a difference in people's lives? Will we get to that point? Yeah, I'm hopeful, but I'm not going to live to see it.
I know, I probably won't either. But, federalism, this idea that I feel like the federal government has gotten too powerful. It probably does. It is probably out of balance right now. And the idea of federalism and different states being able to do different things and be more kind of responsive to the people who live in their state. And so maybe there are opportunities for different states to try different things, or within a state to have a form of federalism where each city has more power to try something different. And so, I don't know, some of the dismantling, maybe there will be good that comes out of that if the same level of freedom, if one state's like every classroom must learn the Bible, I don't agree with that.
I don't either.
But what about in a state like Illinois? What is our equivalent of that? And I think, okay, Alan, you probably have to get out of here. But I think part of what makes me so sad about the vote for the moratorium last night is that as states have their rights, and I think part of economic development is attracting people to your city more and more around shared sets of values, around an identity. And everyone I talk to in just this little endeavor, it's the spirit of Rock Island that makes people want to live here and do business here and grow families here. And so we get to be our own little playground of how do you do economic development while keeping your essential spirit of being a place that is generous and kind and thoughtful. I don't know what you think about that.
So we've gone from this opportunity for universal change and elimination of oligarchies and how government functions back to what's good about Rock Island and how can Rock Island thrive. And I'll take an example of the Hilltop business area in Rock Island, which has all the goods and services and things that you would want in terms of you've got some disposable income, or you've got resources to spend on things that you need, and they're there. You've got hardware stores, you've got grocery stores, you've got restaurants, you've got entertainment options, and it's there. It functions. It's doing okay. What role can the city play in making sure that it stays okay? And I've been working for the last 10 years or so with a friend to try to make the city government more concerned about the stability, vitality of the Hilltop area, because it's so fragile and we can't take it for granted. That's kind of a microcosm of, I think, kind of that spirit of Rock Island that you're talking about, that we have the opportunity to influence how good we can be, because there is goodness in a lot of people out there that are concerned about Rock Island and want to make sure that it sustains itself, that it does grow, that we do have job opportunities, that we do have wealth that's available to share, that we recognize the history that we've got here, build on it, sustain it, and thrive into the future. So, government can play a role in that to a degree, but it cuts back down to people making the decision to get involved, get engaged, and do something about that. And you're taking the bull by the horns with talking to people about on the podcasts and identifying their perspectives and about Rock Island and what we can do. I think is critical to the conversation that can set a stage for what Rock Island can be at some point in the future. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah, well, I think that is my sister lives in Decorah. Have you ever been to Decorah, Iowa?
No.
It's really cool. I mean, and there's probably more wealth there. So, but they have a Norwegian university. We have our Swedish university. And so her and I have talked before about why can't Rock Island be more like Decorah? But what happens in Decorah is everybody shows up for everything. There is such I feel like it's like living on the set of Gilmore Girls. You're probably not familiar with that show.
I've heard about it. I've never seen it.
But it's like all the people in town, and they're all out all the time. And So when you have that sense of identity and that we show up for each other and we're Rock Islanders and Rock Island's awesome, we have our challenges, but we show up. That's economic development. So it's like, oh, I want to go to the Hilltop Market outside the bar where they've just set up that thing where a bunch of artists are. I don't even know if I'm going to buy anything, but I'm going to show up because I love my community. I believe in my community. I'm excited about my community. I'm going to go to Huckleberry's because John has just, and his partner have stuck with it all these years. And he's this business, I think, Citizen of the Year last night.
Well deserved.
But I think part of keeping that is like retaining your spirit, you know, having a city that understands and celebrates our core identity.
Yeah, and we're no different than any other community, and you've got folks that just takes things for granted until they're gone. And then it's, well, how'd that happen? Well, it's because you weren't engaged. You didn't care enough to show up.
Yeah.
And, you know, government play a role in that to a degree? Government kind of sets the stage for how people feel about their community and kind of sets the framework for this little small snippet of society that's out there. And it's something I've always tried to do is make sure that as a public servant, as a public employee, to recognize the value in people that are out there and what they can contribute to the community.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like seeing the ingredients for your city's success as being the people who live in your city and how to unlock that potential and how to not have as much the old money, new money divide, how to create and spread opportunity all around. Yeah. Rock Island is like one of the coolest things about Rock Island. I've said this on the podcast before. It's probably one of the most American cities in the country. So if Illinois is more quote unquote American than any other city, according to, I posted it out on my website, but
okay. And I'm not sure
basically
the source
took the demographics of the whole country and said, you know, Illinois is the most reflective of the whole country. And then a city like Rock Island that's old, that spans, you know, Native Americans to today, post-industrial. We have a demographic breakdown that's very diverse. The challenges we face as a city, we're just a microcosm of the whole country. And if we could find solutions to do things here, they could just like ripple out, because if we can do it here, I don't know many places where you couldn't do it.
Yeah, well, I think that's true. Yeah, we've seen that that those changes in population, the composition of Rock Island has changed over time, clearly, and the school system's reflective of that with 40 plus, 50 plus languages and dialects spoken, and so we are reflective of the country writ large, if you will.
All the painful history of race has happened in our
clearly.
Yeah.
I didn't live through some of the issues back previous generations, but we had the Memorial Day riot in what year was that? 1990 or thereabouts, that took place in Rock Island, and that I had an intern in the middle of it. She was out in a car on 14th and a half Street and got surrounded by a group of kids who were out causing problems, and came back to the office hysterical, and we had to deal with that. But the broader issue was why did that happen? What caused that? What was the root issues? And we are reflective of those dilemmas and those distinctions and those those problems that have existed for multiple generations. And we do have an opportunity to make a difference, but it's not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy.
It's never easy.
It just requires we stay connected.
Yeah, and so we've got the changing population, both in terms of as you mentioned, Native American, but we've got the international populations that have changed the complexion of Rock Island, both in terms of looking at the number of Asian markets, for example, that exist, or the non-traditional food stores that exist now that 15 years ago were not around. Well, that's a good thing. I think that diversity, that blending, Some talk about the country being a melting pot, which I've heard other people say that's not the best way to. We aren't a melting pot because we have those distinctions, we have those differences. We're tossed salad.
I've heard, so I lived in Canada for 2 years,
Okay.
and I worked, I had my master's, but I couldn't work in my field until I had health screenings, and so I worked at a coffee shop in Vancouver, and I was the only American in the coffee shop. The boss was an Asian woman who was South African. The other boss was German. There was a kid from Russia. My friend Nushin was from Iran. There were 2 women from China one spoke Cantonese, one spoke Mandarin. Tony, who made all the food, was from, India, Sri Lanka. He was from Sri Lanka. And when we were in Canada, just noticing like differences in race and culture, and there they talked about it being a mosaic. And so, all these different identities that when next to each other create this beautiful tapestry. So you don't have to melt in or lose your identity.
Right.
You can retain your identity, but you do it in this, in this partnership and appreciation. I mean, not everything was perfect in Canada. I had a lot of trainings there around how Native people were treated, and but I like the mosaic idea.
Yeah, it's another good analogy. Yeah, I think the mosaic provides the opportunity for what's this picture that's being created, and you can add pieces of different composition and materials and colors, etc. And the grout that connects them, or the glue that connects them, likewise the tossed salad, you can keep adding ingredients, and you've got a bowl of deliciousness.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And you can always put different dressings on it too, and that becomes because we do want to retain our culture, our religious backgrounds, our ethnic backgrounds, our societal and cultural backgrounds. Those are important. Excuse me. Yeah, that's what America's about. So we can say that should there have been the decimation of the Native American population and its being placement on reservations? Well, no, that shouldn't have happened. We can't change that, but how do we learn from that? And that's, again, kind of getting it back to my experiences in Rock Island. It's how can Rock Island as an entity, as a government, learn from the experiences, mistakes, and positive things that have happened, and be better for it as a result.
And that competition for resource is often the starting place for conflict. And so even as our population changes, when there's a new competition for resource, groups that perhaps were marginalized 50, 60, 100, years ago may now find themselves feeling certain ways about new populations moving in, and there can be conflict. It's very painful.
Yeah.
And the thing like this community garden ordinance is a kind of a highlighting of that. In the west end of Rock Island, there are families who have, Black families who have worked hard to have home ownership and to own homes and to build their American dream after, all the racism in Rock Island around redlining and property ownership and Jim Crow laws. And so there's home ownership, and then there are Africans moving from other countries who have been through the brutality of war, and, World Relief has said, here's some money to start a life. Here's $45,000 to renovate a house, and now there are crops coming up. And that is economic development for the immigrants and refugees, but there's actually conflict and tension. And it's like so real, and it's also like heartbreaking because it's two groups of people who have been marginalized and oppressed by a larger society and are now neighbors, and some of that tension goes toward one another. I'm not an expert on any of this, but I don't know. There's just, it seems like the play in our world is often to say, how can I pit one vulnerable group against another in order to distract them from the larger issue that, we're all struggling. And we can't, it becomes I don't know. I'm probably saying that horribly and inarticulately.
No.
But it's an ongoing conflict that has really pained me because, it's
Too often than not, we are not interested in learning more about other people, because that can be difficult. And just to learn more about someone, to talk with them, to engage with them, become friends with them, as you cited your Canadian experience with the multi-pronged and diverse workforce and people that you're coworkers. But you talk with them, you learned about them, they learned about you. And that's that bridge building, that communicating, that connection with people makes all the difference. And that was, again, my perspective in government had always been, if not for residents, there's no government.
Yeah.
We are part of it. We're all part of that system. And talking with one another, learning more about one another, recognizing each other as individuals, as humans, is critical to our ability to move forward and not have conflict, because we will have known each other, recognized each other, or if not personally, individually, we may have another common friendship or relationship with someone else that we both have in common, and can point to that saying, oh, yeah, we know something about someone else that brings us together and does not separate us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting as you're saying that. I remember my friend Nushin from Iran. I remember my dog dragging her down the street because she was like, I really want to walk your dog. I'm like, no, you don't. My dog is out of control. You do not want to walk my dog, Louie. She's like, yes, I do. So I let her, and he did. He drug her down the street, skinned her knee. But I also remember she taught me how to say, I love you, which was Duset Daram. And I've never forgotten it. And that is what I know of her language, which I think was Farsi. Is that what they speak in Iran? I don't know.
I believe so.
But that was that was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I still remember how to say, I love you. And that when we bump into cultures in the United States, there's been this big shift in blame the other culture for the reason that you're struggling.
Yeah. Oh.
And it's not that other culture's fault. It's the bigger system.
Yeah.
But and we didn't even talk about the fact that you were the Rock Island Township Supervisor.
That's a whole separate issue. I was going to say the other thing that came to mind is having grown up Jewish in Philadelphia and then living in Titusville and now living here in the Quad Cities in the Rock Island, feeling those things, being Jewish and not necessarily having faced significant amounts of anti-Semitism during my life, which is a good thing, obviously, but knowing that it's always been out there.
Yeah.
And people being surprised when they ask me about Christmas or Easter, and it's like, okay, those are holidays. I get those days off too. I'm not going to celebrate them, although I did have a blended family at home. My wife actually converted to Judaism, but my stepkids did not grow up Jewish. And so we did all the holidays. But the feeling of difference and the blaming people is so easy to do as a means to separate us. And it's someone else's fault that I am in the situation that I'm in. And because it's their fault, I'm going to do something about them, to them. And we've seen results of that over centuries, eons of life.
Yeah. Is it a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah for a girl?
Bat.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the first time I ever saw my husband was my friend Allison Stroud's bat mitzvah, and he was dancing on a chair, and I thought it was so cute. And I think I was in 6th grade.
Oh.
So, yeah. But even just growing up around all sorts of different people in Rock Island is such a gift, because you do get that sense of love and appreciation. Yeah. And if, people are misinformed about a group of people, you can feel protection of speaking up or speaking out against racism or anti-Semitism.
It's a means of bringing people together to learn about each other. And, the ignorance of other people's cultures, religions, values results in nothing but bad things, clearly. And so the more we can learn about one another, the better off we'll be as human beings.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Where are you going the rest of the day, Alan? I've really kept you a long time.
I'm going
You're
to
probably
the dentist.
Oh, well, this is more fun than the dentist.
Yeah. I hope it's just a normal 6 months checkup and cleaning. So.
Yeah.
So.
Do you have any advice, for the existing? I'm sure you don't want to talk about any of the existing things, but do you have any advice for the city? What do you think we need to double down on in our economic development, in our development here?
I think first of all, and I think the City Council took action last night. If they approved the contract with Northern Illinois University,
I think they did.
To do the strategic planning process, and I think it's a longer term project and process than I thought it might have otherwise been. Because in the past, City Council and senior management staff, had gone through a much more abbreviated means to generate priorities, policy direction. And building relationships among city council members, then seems a much longer time frame. But I think that unto itself as a process with a new mayor, 2 new council members, and bridging relationships with city staff will go a long way to create a common vision, which I don't think we've got at this point. There are certainly differences of opinion about what the city should be doing, and once I think that process is completed, I'm hopeful that it will result in a common viewpoint and direction that will set the stage for not just economic development activities, but dealing with different populations in town, dealing with the diversity of the populations in Rock Island, dealing with identifying the strengths and the resources that we do have available in Rock Island now, and how we can build on those and marshal those forces in a more positive way, I think will be critical to the city's future. So I'm optimistic in that regard. And as we were talking about going from, the more mundane, getting somebody's roof fixed, to the existential of viewpoint on humans generally and on Earth and our place in the universe, I think there's the opportunity for Rock Island to make use of the programs that are not going to go away. Those structured programs are still going to exist out there in some fashion, and turn those into a better way for Rock Island to move forward, making use of that layer cake of incentives that are out there to respond to the needs for human and emotional growth of our residents. So I think, we're on the precipice, I hope, of a more positive direction, because I think in the last several years the city's been kind of directionless, and needs to be better focused. And I think that seems to be the way that they're heading now.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful.
There's some hope on the horizon, and
always have to have hope.
Yeah, I like that. Well, that's probably hope is always a good place to end things, and I've kept you for a long time. Sorry I coughed on you.
I'll do my best to sustain my health, despite my exposure to you.
I just coughed into the couch, though. This couch is very absorbent, and I'm sure it absorbed all the germs.
Glad to hear that.
So I really enjoyed talking to you today, and
thank you.
Hope to get to talk to you again. And do you write? Do you write like letters to the editor or anything like that?
No.
Or give feedback in any?
Yeah, I'll talk to some people behind the scenes on certain things, and have some connections with people in city government or
Well, if you ever
elsewhere.
felt like writing like an opinion piece or sharing a thought, I'd post it on my website.
Okay, fair enough.
As a guest kind of columnist, no pressure.
Okay.
But if you ever had a strong feeling about something, or you just have so much experience in the city of Rock Island and the history, and so if you ever had any wisdom to share, I would post it for you.
Okay.
And
I will keep that in mind.
10 to 15 people might read it.
Yeah.
So.
It'll just become viral.
Yeah, it'll go viral.
Yeah, right.
So.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Annika. I appreciate your time and what you're doing here, and keep up the good work.
Yeah, well, thank you. Okay, we did it. Thank you so much. I'm sorry if that was super random.